The Waking Tree by C. Don McCallum. Chapter 4. The Drawer. In grooves of a once living tree Christopher dwelled, missing the muddy puddles that he once jumped in, splashing. He missed his mother's smell. He missed her brushing his wind-matted hair smooth, feeling her fingertips graze his neck with her incidental touches. He wanted to hear her stories about his daddy, about how they would have worked in the woods together, in the workshop together, building things. He wanted to see how his body would match his father's body as he grew. When he was grown, Christopher would be strong enough to save them all from whatever came along. What would his daddy's voice feel like in his ears when he was happy, when he was angry? Christopher even missed running through the woods with his big brother, Jared, behind him, tight-fisted and raging, to feel his brother's knuckles on his arm and his gut, to erase the feeling of blood draining from his tiny body into this drawer. Lord knew where his daddy went. There were only snapshots and fading echoes in his head. But the shape and form of what he remembered about his daddy looked kind of like their neighbor, Mr. Abbott, especially when he stood and talked to him and stroked his hair. Mr. Abbott's hands. There was no call for what he did. Christopher only wanted to be close to the man who might have been his daddy since his wasn't around anymore. But not that close. He didn't want his hot, putrid breath. "Do you have any kids, Mr. Abbott?" Christopher asked. "I don't have any, son, but sometimes I wish I did," Mr. Abbott said through his few remaining teeth and the interspersed replicas. Christopher liked it when Mr. Abbott called him son. He wanted a daddy of his own. Other people's memories weren't enough for him anymore. Picked up and tousled, hugged and talked to, yelled at and spanked if necessary. These are the roles of a son, roles that Christopher wanted to play in the sunlight or moonlight or cloudiness of whatever the earth was willing to provide. "Mr. Abbott could be my new daddy," the boy thought. "I'll have to be good so he'll want to marry Mama." Mr. Abbott combed his dark chocolate hair down as flat and smooth as he could make it. Then the pain came, the crying. Blood has memory, and it too longs for its home. Christopher taught me that. He remembered the blood pushing out in a thick, incensed flood. In the chest of drawers where he now dwelled, the blood had seeped in years ago. His blood looked for veins to pulse through, but all it could find was wood grain. "Let yourself lie in my veins," the dead wood of the drawer told the boy's dying warmth. "I miss the life that used to hum in me. Swim around and find someplace comfortable to lie." "He shouldn't have done it," Christopher's blood said, settling into the wood of the drawer where his cut-up limbs laid hidden. "I just wanted a daddy. He shouldn't have done it." "Forget it. Stay here with me, and I will hold you as long as you need. You're still near your mama. You can still tell her things, secrets. Tell her that you love her." As kind as the drawer was to him, Christopher pushed as hard as his dismembered hands could manage, but time and the actions of that summer day wouldn't budge him from its firmly planted realization that what is must be. So he stayed, and there he remained. He should have allowed it all. Mr. Abbott's rough, dry hands could have done less harm alone than with that axe. Instead, he cried in the solitude of the remnants of a dead tree and called out for the fresh air and his mother's kind touch and whispers of eternal love. Jared would have recognized the voice in the chest of drawers if he hadn't been yelling. Instead, he walked by, deaf to the constant sobbing in the familiar piece of furniture, dragging Abra by the arm. His fingers dug into her skin, marking her red and white. Those prints would be dark and tender by morning, but Abra wouldn't remember where she got them. The crying she heard wouldn't stop, and she couldn't find where it came from. Everything else was shadows. "You got to get me out of here," the voice begged. Even though Abra felt the voice's long suffering, she didn't understand the nature of the scream. It all sounded like her own head, the tormenting warnings of a quick, harsh words flicking from her mother's tongue. Yes, she was losing her mind. Just leave me alone, Abra said, letting the words echo through her bones. None of it was real, she knew. Clinical depression is what the doctor called it. Jared called it crazy. Stripped and shivering, Abra welcomed the sound of the streaming hot water filling the bathtub. Perhaps it would drown out the voice, or at least erode the sound of the cries that forced her into the night air. She stood limp in the tub, her feet apart. Those feet held a secret that never made it to her head, but her heart held it close and wondered about the two little boys her body felt playing in the woods tonight. Years ago, they stood on those same shaking rocks under the same trees and stars. The water of the filling bathtub flooded over her feet and tried to clean them of the vague, lingering memories. The tiles on the wall trembled, trying to escape the hold of the grout. She thought they would have hurled themselves at her if they could have. Do something, they pleaded. Get us out of here. She grabbed at the glossy wall, trying to scratch them out of their long-held places, bending her fingernails up and back from the force of her prying hands. Jared knocked her arms down to her sides, shoved her down flat, and poured water on her head. Tiny estuaries spilled down her face. The water rose. Jared also saw the two boys, his past soaked in. He and Christopher were in this bathtub again, like they had been years ago in their little boy bodies. Jared splashed the gray water into his brother's soapy face. Don't, Christopher whined. Jared slid his nakedness along the slippery porcelain, smiling as he watched his little brother scrub at his aching eyes, squealing. His little brother fumbled for a washcloth that he knew floated somewhere near him in the water. His little hand hunted a towel that he had seen his mother drop on the floor. Laughing, Jared moved everything out of Christopher's reach, playing a game of keep away with his soap-blinded brother, keeping him from the relief he sought. Help me, Christopher wept. It hurts. Then Bernadine yelled from the kitchen where she cooked their supper. What are you boys doing in there? Nothing, Jared hollered back in his little voice, finally handing the washcloth to his brother. Able to open his red eyes at last, Christopher looked at his brother. Why do you have to be so mean? Because I hate you, Jared whispered. Now Jared's hard hands ground the soap and water against Abra's dusty skin, mixing it all in the quickly graying water crawling up her body. The memories of the night seeped away now, the stars and the earth's grit. Everything Abra's senses had gathered were leaving her. They would drain in pipes under the ground. As much pain as they caused, she wanted them back. Stop it, she groaned, her eyelids clamped shut, wanting no part of the hot water, the imitation floral scents. You stop it, Abra, Jared yelled. He grabbed her by her shoulders and shook her hard. Her head toggled from his anger, and Abra sunk along the slippery, smooth surface on the bottom of the tub back into the rising water. Just an inch of water, she thought. That's all it would take. I'll turn my head. I'll breathe it in. No matter how hard I stretch my branches, they don't reach as far as I'd like them to. Thank you for listening to The Waking Tree by C. Dawn McCallum. If you're enjoying this story, please consider sharing it with someone you know. And please like the video and subscribe to this channel to help others discover these stories.